As you know, Bhikkhu Bodhi is a monk who was born in New York City, so he's one of ours. He's a Brooklynite. Obtained a PhD in philosophy from Claremont Graduate School in 1972, and was ordained in Sri Lanka in 1972. He's a brilliant editor and translator of Buddhist texts, and also compiled an anthology of suttas from the Pali Canon called In the Buddha's Words. He's been living in the United States. He's been back from Sri Lanka since 2002, living in the United States, and is now residing at Chuanyan Monastery, which is not so far from New York City. So we're very, very fortunate to have a really amazing scholar and incredibly compassionate and courageous person. Thank you, Bhikkhu Bodhi, for all that you have brought to us. So I give you Bhikkhu Bodhi.
The original article that I wrote that was published in Buddha Dharma, I concluded that article, and I'll repeat the same quotation that Gina read, because I think it will lead into what I want to say. The special challenge facing Buddhism in our age is to stand up as an advocate for justice in the world, a voice of conscience for those victims of social, economic, and political injustice who cannot stand up and speak for themselves. Basically, this was the article that set a number of my friends thinking and discussing with one another how we can act in order to bend the transcendent truth of the Dharma back upon the world in order to engage human suffering at multiple levels. And so once we engaged in our initial discussions, we had to find some particular focus for our mission. In effect, we were asking ourselves that question that Andrew poses so often: what is it that breaks your heart? And there are so many things that break my own heart. When I see countries invaded by a very powerful nation, villages bombed, when I read about drone attacks that kill 40, 50, 90 people, innocent people, just because one terrorist might be hiding amongst them, that breaks my heart. When I read about the melting of the Arctic ice, about the melting of the ice sheets in the Antarctic, and about the tragedy that this portends for millions upon millions of people in the future, that breaks my heart. When I see a congressman stand up and say, I think global warming is the greatest hoax ever perpetuated on America, and he receives an ovation from his fellows in Congress, that breaks my heart. When I see the rich get richer, negotiate tax cuts for themselves, while millions of Americans lose their jobs, lose any kind of financial security, lose their homes, that breaks my heart. But when I read about global hunger, which is something that I've seen for myself living in Asia for more than 20 years, and something that I've experienced actually to some extent myself living in a very poor temple during my first years as a monk, where all we received each day for our food is a bowl of rice and a watery curry day after day. Then I can understand the misery of hunger. How when one really suffers from hunger, not If you miss one meal, you say, oh, I'm starving. Let's go to the restaurant, the French restaurant, and get a nice meal. But when one is going day after day until all of the nutrients and micronutrients that the body needs to sustain itself are drained away, and one lives just thinking about food. One eats one meal, it's quickly digested, and then one starts thinking about the next meal. That is what breaks my heart. And yet we live in a world in which people are allocating to themselves, heads of corporations, heads of the financial business, the financial companies, allocating to themselves salaries of $20 million, $30 million, $50 million, in which countries are investing billions of dollars to develop weapons of mass destruction, and I don't mean Saddam Hussein. When I reflect on the fact that it would take just a small percentage of the gross domestic product of the advanced Western countries to eliminate poverty, to eliminate hunger, to transform the lives of people living in the most abject misery, that breaks my heart, but it also gives me a glimmer of light, a glimmer of hope at the thought that when we put our minds and hearts to this task, when we see it as a compelling necessity, then I have the confidence, the trust, the hope that it can be done.